The debate continues over and around the legacy of former Chief Justice Dhananjay Chandrachud. He has perhaps been the most discussed judge in recent memory, polarizing opinion, triggering responses, sharp and fierce responses, both among his supporters and his critics. But is life really that black and white? Doesn't every individual, including each one of us, have a mixed bag as our legacy? I'm Barkha Dutt, you're with the Mojo Story. As a new Chief Justice takes helm at the Supreme Court and an old one exits, Justice Dhananjay Chandrachud has perhaps been one of the most scrutinized, debated, and discussed Chief Justices of India. This could have something to do with the long term that he was in charge of. He was Chief Justice for 2 years. It could also have something to do with the times we live in, polarized times where, unless I'm confirming your bias, suddenly I'm the enemy. And I don't mean this about myself, but anybody in public life. These images of the Prime Minister dropping in to meet Justice Dhananjay Chandrachud also triggered a storm. Many believed that it was an inappropriate meeting. There have been many comments praising and criticizing Justice Chandrachud. And to talk about what his legacy might look like to history, I want to welcome on the program today our newsmaker, Justice Deepak Gupta, who's of course a retired judge of the Supreme Court himself, and also somebody who had, as he wrote famously in a column, a freshly brewed coffee with Justice Dhananjay Chandrachud for almost 3 years, so has had occasion to know him well and also observe him well. Thank you very much, sir, for joining us. Why do you think there are so many opinions about Justice Chandrachud? Let's start there. There has been Justice Lalit before him. There's been Justice Gogoi. I don't remember in recent memory so much public debate over an individual judge. Why do you think that is?
No, I think there are 2, 3 reasons for this. One, Justice Chandrachud had a very long tenure, 2 years. None of the others had such a long tenure. Justice Lalit had 70 odd days in which he did a very good job, I thought. Justice Chandrachud, also the expectation from him were very, very high. He had set the bar very high for himself. I can tell you, he's a brilliant mind. He's very hardworking. He's up at 3:30 in the morning working. He's a workaholic, very brilliant. And he had a very liberal, his past, all his judgments, the privacy judgment, the Navtej Johar judgment, whether it's privacy, gay sex, adultery, Joseph Shine. I mean, all of his judgments were... So the expectations from him were, I thought, much, much higher, very difficult for anybody to meet. He's also human after all. And there are some parts of his legacy which are extremely good, some which I think could have been better.
Before I come to the column that you wrote when he actually took over as Chief Justice, some of your fellow judges from the bench have been quite critical of Justice Chandrachud, and one of the points that has been criticized is that Justice Chandrachud was too accessible. Do you believe that? Because he certainly did change the idea that a judge should be remote, should be seen but not heard. He was often both seen and heard. What did you make of that?
See, Barkha, times are changing. I think now judges can't live in cloistered ivory towers. It's that long part. Even the very conservative judges now make appearances somewhere or the other. Yes, his appearances much more. I don't have any quarrel with any judge having appearances either in law colleges or in bar associations or all. But I think when you go too far and wide, then it has a reaction, which I think, unfortunately for Justice Dhananjay Chandrachud, the reaction was that he's been seen too often. And then, so you can question him that much more.
So you're saying that the flip side of being as much in the public eye as he was is that you also get judged more harshly, you get scrutinized much more.
Yeah.
And to that extent, he took a risk with his own legacy.
I don't. He has used the word legacy. Everybody's using the word legacy. I don't feel the word legacy is the right thing, because we have our own backgrounds. We have our own inherent, each one of us has an inherent bias in which school we've gone to, what is our background, what's our thinking. We all have our own
Yeah.
biases. And they
Yeah.
do, to a certain extent, reflect in the judgments which a judge passes. Legacies, I think, I have not found, I mean, even when Justice Dhananjay Chandrachud used the word legacy speaking in Bhutan, I am not, a judge should not be worried about what legacy leaves behind. Judge should only worry about the constitution and whether while deciding the cases is applying the constitution and the laws. Be true to your, that is all. Rest, history will judge you, and to judge a person one day after retirement, I think, is not very fair. You have to look at his whole work over the period of 20, 25 years. We're all humans. We all have made mistakes. Some of our judgments will be correct, some will not be correct. Some which which I may say are incorrect, later will be found to be that my view is wrong, his view is right. So I think that's part of the judicial system we have. So I don't look at it that way.
Let me come to a very interesting column that you wrote in the Week magazine when Justice Chandrachud actually took over as Chief Justice, and you said that Chief Justice Chandrachud would be measured according to you, by five benchmarks. First was to restore the Supreme Court, or to reinforce, I should say, not restore, to reinforce the Supreme Court as a court not just for penalties and penalization and punishment, but also a court that upholds rights and liberty, right? And I think that was a very interesting point. So I'm going to go step by step on this score. How do you think Justice Chandrachud has performed? Because there is a lot of debate over the Supreme Court being much too conservative with bail, for example, or it taking too long for people to get bail, and the Chief Justice does preside over the entire judicial system. So let's start with the first point. You wrote the Chief Justice has to ensure that the marginalized and the underprivileged are not denied their rights, that the court must be seen to be a court that upholds individual rights, personal liberty. How would you say Justice Chandrachud has performed on this score?
No, personally, Justice Chandrachud has performed very well on this count. Personally, all his judgments, the judgments he has authored, by and large, they always ensure that the marginalized and the underprivileged are given their rights. In fact, he believes in positive discrimination in favor of the marginalized and the underprivileged. You'll find that when in cases of women officers, in cases of the underprivileged, a number of cases, I don't want to go into individual cases, but a number of cases you find, yes, that when you come to the other part, that under his watch, many people were denied bail. When he was the chief of the court, some of the bail matters. Now that I will deal with while I deal with another part of the five things I expected from him. As far as personally he went, I think he ensured that the marginalized, I think he lived up to my expectations as far as this part is concerned.
So you are drawing a distinction between his own judgments, on which you feel he was personally, he always leaned towards upholding personal liberty. In fact, his last verdict was about how bulldozer justice is not acceptable. But
in fact, there would have been no debate about it. I think this should have come a long time back, frankly.
Yeah. But you say that in terms of the judiciary overall, institutionally, which is on his watch, upholding those rights, he performed less better as the leader of a team.
See, again, if you look at all his speeches in the last 3 years,
yes,
I've gone through some of them, or last 2 years rather, after he became Chief Justice, he has been asking trial court judges and high court judges to be much more liberal while granting bail. In fact, while addressing a lot of judicial officers of the district judiciary, he has been insisting that you should be more liberal while granting bail. But unfortunately, that has not happened, not only in the district court, but unfortunately even at the level of the high court and the Supreme Court also. There are some judges who are very conservative in granting bail. Now that is something which the Chief Justice, he is the first amongst equals. He can't direct another judge of the High Court that you decide in this manner.
So that distinction is interesting, and actually it reflects in a number of his judgments. Even if you see other judgments or other sort of red hot issues, Justice Chandrachud himself rules as a liberal, but he's not necessarily able to carry the bench with him.
Yeah, but that he's an individual. That's what I'm saying. The
Yeah.
chief is just the first amongst equals. He's the captain of the team. That's about all.
Let's go to your second point that you brought up in this column. You said steps needed to be taken to uphold and maintain the independence of the judiciary. How would you say Justice Chandrachud has scored on this front? This is contentious because everybody has a different opinion of how independent the judiciary is, and depending on people's ideological affiliations, the judiciary is either very independent or very beholden to the to power. How do you see it?
No, let me first of all preface it by saying that when any case is fought, there are two parties in a case, if not more. Now, the party which loses will always go to complain that the judge has done the wrong thing. So that is one step. But there is,
Yes.
like in the first I said, I think he has by and large largely risen up to my expectations. Here I feel he's fallen short somewhat. And
In maintaining, in protecting the independence of the judiciary?
for me, the biggest in this part was in the 370 case. I'm not going to the abrogation, whether the abrogation was right or wrong. That's a judgment. You see, we can criticize the judgment right or wrong, but where I really felt the court should not have abdicated its function is when they did not decide whether a state could be converted into a union territory. That question they did not decide. It was argued before them. They did not decide that on the statement by the Solicitor General that the elections would be held soon, not realizing very well that before the elections are held, all the powers of the state government have been taken away.
So when you look at the 370 case and the fact that the Supreme Court did not even engage with the legality of whether a state can be converted to a union territory in the manner that Jammu and Kashmir was, you believe that he fell short of maintaining the image of the Supreme Court as a fiercely independent court.
Yeah, that fiercely independent needs to be done. We have now Justice Sanjeev Khanna coming in, whose lineage goes back to the famous Justice H.R. Khanna. Now, that is the image I would like to have of the judiciary.
And Justice H.R. Khanna, for the benefit of our audience, of course, spoke
Was
up
the
against the...
who authored the famous dissenting judgment in A.D.M. Shukla's case, saying that you cannot take away the liberty of any citizen, life or liberty of any citizen, even during a period of emergency.
Now, in what you've said, there are many ironies right there. Justice H.R. Khanna was the dissenting note on the emergency judgment. Justice Dhananjay Chandrachud's own father did not take that position. And he has publicly said that he disagreed with his father on the emergency response by the Supreme Court.
No, he's overruled that. He's specifically overruled. Yeah.
So you would have wanted that kind of fierceness of independence from Justice Chandrachud.
I mean, it was not that fierce. As fierce. I'm not saying that he was towing the government line, but somewhere in some matters which one didn't see that independence totally coming out.
Now, the counter argument to what you're saying may be those who bring up electoral bonds, for example, as an illustration of the one issue where the court really, went against what the government of the day believed in. And there are other examples that they may give of in a similar way.
No. You see, I have given one example, but I'm sorry to interrupt you. I've given you one example. But there's so many, recently the AMU judgment, the electoral. I don't decide a judge's independence by the judgments he gives. Because judgments may be right, may be wrong. It's not necessary that the view I hold on a particular point is the right view always. When we sit in benches, that is the purpose of sitting in benches. He has been in the minority as Chief Justice. He has been in the minority in one or two cases.
Yes, absolutely. No, point taken. Now, one of the major talking points around the perception of independence or lack thereof was when the Prime Minister dropped in to greet Justice Chandrachud and his family on Ganesh Chaturthi. And these images created a storm. Is this a storm in a teacup, or is this legitimate? Both arguments have been made on both sides of this debate, that judges and heads of government meet all the time, that if there was something nefarious, they could have anyway met in private. They didn't have to meet in the gaze of public cameras. How do we, the people, know what conversations go on behind closed doors, etc., etc.? What did you think of that meeting in the context of the larger debate around the perception of the independence of the judiciary?
He put it just that it was an avoidable meeting.
It was avoidable?
Yeah.
Why do you say that?
When we talk of the independence of judiciary, it is also the perception in the public mind. When we meet as chief justices of the high courts, we meet the chief ministers as the chief justice of the country, of the Supreme Court of India. Justice Chandrachud was well entitled to meet the prime minister. But normally these meetings would be where agendas are set in, where there is some official. You don't meet on a. I don't think this has been. I know of 2 instances which have been cited earlier of judges going, but even if I don't think those 2 incidents were either very good examples, which was done earlier.
But again, the argument. Sorry to interrupt you. The argument could be made that they could have a meeting in private. At least this was in front of the cameras. Everybody got to know. If anything really, if any sort of inappropriate, let's say, conversation had to take place theoretically, it could take place in private. You don't need the cameras.
I don't think it's a question of. That's why I've said it's not. It's the perception. I don't think that anything wrong was done in that meeting. I'm sure nothing wrong was done in the meeting. I'm sure nothing was discussed. But what goes in the public mind when these pictures are splashed across the country on all newspapers, on news channels, what do people feel? They feel the Chief Justice and the Chief Justice of India and the Prime Minister on the same page. They may or may not be. But it just gives a wrong impression. That's my only feeling, that a little bit of restraint on these things is better. Even if there was a meeting, it was not necessary to have it publicized so much.
Okay, let's move on to your the third benchmark that you actually set for Justice Chandrachud when he took over as Chief Justice. We've already looked at independence. We're now moving to the next point, which is, of course, the functioning of the Collegium. The Collegium system must be made more objective and transparent. Now, let me say here that some unusual things did happen. A lot more public information or access to the public on what the Collegium is thinking, why certain decisions are taken, why certain decisions are not taken. What do you make of this benchmark that you set for Justice Chandrachud?
As far as objectivity and transparency are concerned, I think he did a very good job. As far as the transparency is concerned, especially, a much better job than before. There can be aberrations. We can discuss an issue here and there. But my only with the function of the Collegium is something which I had not thought. They've not been firm enough and get their Collegium resolutions. Actually, the government has just sat over some of the Collegium resolutions. That, I think, is the sad part. Otherwise, I have no problem with the functioning of the Collegium. I have no inside information, so I believe it must have functioned correctly. But there is a lot of transparency. I also read only from the Supreme Court Collegium resolution. There's definitely more information on that. But I feel that definitely this the firmness which the Supreme Court should have shown to see that its Collegium resolutions are implemented is not there.
And even in terms of the appointment of judges, the government was able to just sit on some.
We have too many examples. We have one Justice Saurabh Karpal for, I don't know, 5 years or 6 years.
Yes.
I mean, how can the government sit on it? You have to.
And it appears bases his sexual orientation, which makes it even more ironic because Justice Chandrachud was part of the bench that decriminalized homosexuality. So a lot of ironies there.
I'm not saying, Barkha, again, there are practical aspects. Though the judiciary is supposed to be, we must. How far can you go? Even the judiciary. I mean, there are people who say send the Home Secretary behind bars and all. It doesn't work like that. You have to both work together. Sometimes when you work together, there are certain compromises also. I'm not saying, there are. But then something, either the Supreme Court should withdraw the recommendation, say we are now for X, Y reason withdrawing the recommendation. But you have the recommendation, you are reiterating it, and then you can still not enforce it. And not only this, look at the transfer of 4 judges from the Gujarat High Court.
Right. Right. So you're
And
saying that
I
if
don't want to say, from what I hear, those 4 judges were transferred for reasons which can be read into the Collegium resolutions. They're not so transparent there. So, one is being fair, objective and transparent, but one also has to be found to show that your decisions are implemented by the government.
But when the government just doesn't act, what should a judge do?
Well, Justice Kaul was doing something, and I don't want to say anything further. The case was taken away from him.
Well, that actually takes us to the next point on the roster, right? And if that's going to come up from your column in just a moment. The Chief Justice is the master of the roster. He must drop the roster. Now, one of the things that you said in this column is that Justice Chandrachud is tech savvy, that he should have actually computerized the system of allocation of cases. There should be no perception of subjectivity in this. You mentioned Justice Kaul. It's now public knowledge. I mean, Justice Kaul himself has not hidden this, that a case is taken away and given to another court. Now, how do you say Justice Chandrachud performed on this score as the master of the roster? Because there are whispers, frankly, even in the legal community on this. More than whispers, roars.
Not too well.
Yes.
I just say not too well. Because
elaborate.
I had said that, and I still believe, and as Chief Justice in 2 courts, I have also implemented a roster where the roster works by itself. You computerize the roster, you say these benches will hear these matters. So when you leave discretion at the hands of anybody, even if it is used, the discretion is acted upon fair manner, but people will raise voices if things don't happen. Now, a roster was made, and a roster should be made, and and then cases go strictly according to roster, there's no problem. But I think here, because I found many judges in court raising the question how not only Justice Kaul's case, Justice Oak, others have raised these questions in court proceedings, that this case was with me, now it has gone to somewhere else. Justice Gavai has said about the tree case, the felling of trees case. So there is something where I feel something could have been done better. And Justice Chandrachud being so tech savvy, he's improved. You see, you must give him credit for having a huge number of constitution bench cases decided. You have to give him credit for introducing video conferencing for hearing of cases in a big way. He is I'm not even maybe 5% of how tech savvy he is. But then if he is so tech savvy, you can definitely have the roster made computerized with as little human intervention as possible. So there I feel, I definitely feel
was this his weakest link as master of the roster?
I would say he did not perform up to my expectation. That's all right.
Let's go to the fifth and the last benchmark that you actually set for him in that column. The full court should meet more often to discuss important administrative issues. How do you think he performed on this score?
See, I am not privy to all, because now I don't know, but I am told that a number of full courts were held during his tenure, which were never held during my tenure. In my tenure, the only full courts were to decide the calendars or to appoint designate senior advocates. I don't remember there was any other full court. I'm told in his tenure, a lot of more full court, but I still feel much more could have been done. Because what has happened is that the Supreme Court, not only in Justice Dhananjay Chandrachud's tenure, it is right from the very beginning, is a very registry-centric court, a Chief Justice-centric court. What I feel is that the administrative capabilities of the other 33 judges on the bench are not made full use of. I had written a letter to Justice Ranjan Gogoi when I was the judge and he was the Chief Justice. Recommending that a committee should be formed of 5 judges in the Supreme Court outside the Collegium who have the longest tenure. So they are outside the Collegium, not bogged down with appointing judges and all that, so much other work. But they have the longest tenure, so they are likely to be the either chief justices or senior judges. I would not have come into that committee, so it was not for my benefit. And I said they should formulate a policy, lay down the norms on how the registry should run. Because then there is a continuity. You see, what has happened now is every chief justice comes with his bright ideas, some right, some wrong. But more often than not, the ideas of the previous chief justice are discarded, and then we are left in a hiatus. What Justice Chandrachud has introduced now, paperless courts and all, Justice Keher attempted it when I became a judge in February 2017. But soon after Justice Keher retired, it all went down and nobody talked about it till Justice Chandrachud took over in 2022. So for 5 years, nobody talked about paperless court. So this is what I think. I think when I'm talk about more full court and on administrative issues, is that all 34 judges should be involved. In the high courts, we have committees, a lot of committees which look into administrative matters. There's an administrative committee, there's a rules committee, so that and the chief justice has so much on his hand. So let the work be divided. It will be easier task, I think.
Let's end with
a plus or minus on this. Though probably he has more pluses on this because he at least held meetings.
Fair enough. Let us end with my asking you what you would remember as his biggest achievement and what leaves you the most disappointed.
No, the biggest achievement. There's so many. I am telling you, there's so many. His number of constitution bench cases being decided, the Nafte Johar judgment, same-sex, privacy judgment, you name it. I mean, there are so many. He's done tremendous work. But for me, the weakest link would be the Kashmir not deciding whether a state can be converted into union territory. Rest, I don't know.
Well, plainly spoken there. We leave it there, Justice Deepak Gupta. Manmohan Singh used to say history will be kinder to me. I don't know what Justice Chandrachud is feeling at this point. You've been quite...
See, let me... because the expectations, I think expectations of Justice Chandrachud were much higher than from anybody else. It's something... He's a brilliant mind. He's a workaholic. So people thought that everything will... And we have this habit in our country that if one judgment, if electoral bond is decided in one favor, everybody goes gaga over him. If Kashmir decides 370 abrogation is right, he's worked like... I think it works like that. It's not that... It doesn't work like that. But yes, I've told you where I feel he's right, where he's wrong. But I think at heart, he's a liberal man. At heart, he has his heart in the right place. And he's done a lot of good things. None of us is perfect. And so is he. Fair enough.
Yeah. We're all mixed bags in our own ways. Thank you so much, Justice Gupta. Always a pleasure. Take care. See you soon.
Thank you so much.
It's great to see you here. Thank you for watching our work. If you haven't subscribed yet, don't forget to click the bell icon and subscribe to Mojo Story and support independent, robust journalism.